Hello, my studio teacher friends. Welcome to the Beyond Measure podcast. Today, we are talking about spending our money. Yikes, this one applies to everyone. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Christina Whitlock, and I am your host and self appointed anytime piano teacher friend. And now, here goes nothing. Let's get on with episode 163. Cheers to spending like an artist. Truth be told, I have been through many iterations of this episode title over the past few months. At one point, I was going to title it Cheers to the Artists with the Money, though I figured you would all take one look at that and think, are there artists who actually have the money? I know some of you saw the title Spending Money Like an Artist and assumed that this was an episode about being frugal and making it through this difficult economy with less. But the truth is, there are lots of people who talk about frugal living better than I do, even though I am definitely a fan. I hunt deals with the best of them, friends, and I know I'm in good company there. We recognize the fact that we did not enter this profession with delusions of making millions, and we need to be wise in our spending. But actually, that's exactly what we're talking about today, being wise in our spending. Not in a bargain hunting fashion, but in a spend your money on what truly matters most kind of way. As I have mentioned multiple times here on this show, the primary thing to remember about any financial matter is the fact that, to some extent, we all get to choose where we want our money to go. There's a reason that my zero energy list includes not spending any time in judgment over how people spend their money. The Zero Energy List, by the way, is currently the #1 downloaded episode of this podcast. So go check out episode 76 if you haven't already. In short, tempting as it may be, I do not allow myself to dwell on how studio families choose to spend their money. We never know the full picture of their financial situations, and money is just a very personal thing. If families want to complain about how expensive my tuition is while they drive their Maserati around town, so be it. They probably need to be frugal with their cash because the rest of it is all tied up in their summer home in Greece, right? As I said, we all spend money based on what is most important to us. A few years ago, Melinda French Gates was on a book tour for her debut book. It was called The Power of Lift: How Empowering Women Changes the World. Full disclosure here, I have not read that book, but I did listen to several interviews with her while she was releasing it. The premise is the fact that when women are in positions of power, when women have say in how money is spent, priorities skew towards people, health, support, care, those kinds of things. She has a lot of evidence and experience with countries and organizations all over the world where she feels like this is proven. Now, I am not here to debate the merits of Melinda French Gates' work. Agree or disagree, that's not the point of today's episode. But her interviews got me thinking about how certain groups of people will prioritize different areas of spending. Namely, I started thinking about how artists spend money. And that is what we are pondering today. I think we can all agree that everyone gets to spend their money the way they choose. Within reason, of course, because I realize I'm releasing this episode in the heart of tax season, when many of us studio teachers are crying over our calculators. I just keep thinking that If women are prone to prioritize certain things when they are in positions of financial power, artists, regardless of gender, should also be prone to prioritize their things, right? And to some extent, we do. But we are also often so frugal or so concerned about financial stability that we neglect to support the things we know to really matter. My hope for today's episode is to help us all remember that it is good and right to support artistic work in whatever ways we can. I am someone who has a tendency to feel guilty around spending money. I just am. I carry around this narrative that any money spent is inherently selfish or frivolous or some other negative reflection on my attachment to worldly things. I don't know where this comes from. I grew up in a home where money was spent pretty freely. But anyway, this is not about me. No one has to convince us that the arts matter, right? I keep looking around at our divided world, our off the charts anxious and depressed society. It is the work of the creatives that offers solace from all the hard stuff, right? Everywhere you look, the things offering joy or escape from the grind of the world are brought to us by artists in one way or another. Without creative work, our quality of life would feel pretty bleak. So, my hypothesis is this: among other things that also matter, because there are many, we should prioritize supporting artists. Artists should support artists. I know, you've heard this from me before, but really, friends, the question of the day is, how do you feel about supporting other creative work? I am kind of hiding behind my hands here as I ask that question because I can feel some of you getting defensive already. Please know, I am not throwing around a sword of conviction over here. I'm just trying to get you thinking. This podcast is, was, and will forever be a judgment free zone. But being a frugal person who tries to be very intentional about where her money goes, I know how easy it is to fall into the trap of not wanting to spend money on things, even when I find value in them. I'm going to be brutally honest here for a moment, okay? We get spoiled in piano teacher world because there is a generosity among many of our colleagues to share free content. We have these online teacher groups where there are incredible exchanges of ideas and advice. Teachers across the internet share resources and lesson plans and music and activities simply out of a generous desire to help one another. It is one of my very favorite things about our profession. In the very first episode of this podcast, I talked about how much love I gained for this community of ours when pandemic lockdowns hit and people stepped way up to help share their experiences of virtual teaching and the like. It was the best of the best, my friends. We are so fortunate to have each other. But here's the thing: being able to get so much for free can work against us too. I often talk to teachers who are trying to make do with resources that are lesser quality or not exactly what they need because they don't want to pay for something better. Teachers are even notorious for skirting copyright laws to find unlicensed versions of sheet music for free. That's probably the one that drives me the craziest because it's actively hurting our fellow artists by depriving them of the money that is owed to them. The truth of the matter is, if we want quality materials to teach from, if we want good music and thoughtful pedagogical sequences and visually effective materials, we cannot depend on people to give us all of those things for free. It is not fair to the health of our profession. And I just have to say, it is actively stealing from our colleagues. Again, if you feel like I'm judging you, that is not my intent. When I was in college, I taught in a multi teacher studio where the copier was always in use. There were these quote reference books that teachers would freely photocopy from on a very regular basis. I'm horrified now at how blatant our offenses were then, but I didn't understand the extent of the crime then. Know better and do better, right? And I'm here to tell you, friends, as lovingly as I can, photocopying a piece of music for a student because you don't want them to have to buy the entire book, that's stealing. There's no room for this rationale of, oh, they already make plenty of money, or, oh, my 20-cent royalty isn't going to make a difference. Nope, 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 nope. We have to know better and do better, right? I've come to a point in my artist life where I've just made the blanket decision that if it's worth using, it's worth paying for. If I consume a lot of free material from a single person, whether that's on social media or somewhere on the web or whatever, like those speakers and writers and creators that we follow, when they release a book, I almost always buy it. When they offer a new product, I always consider it. Partially because their paid offerings are probably going to be really good, but also because even if they're not, it gives me a way to financially support that person in hopes they'll be able to continue producing content that I find beneficial. Again, if it's worth using, if it's worth consuming, it's worth paying for. Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room before we go any further. This is kind of an awkward topic because, hi, I'm an online content creator with lots of free offerings and some paid as well. Cross my heart, friends, I am not saying any of this in an attempt to guilt you into purchasing things from me. That is not my intent. And the fear of you thinking otherwise is exactly what's kept me from releasing this episode for the past several months. To be honest, I just finally got the courage to release this as I've been thinking about a recent loss in the music teaching world. Our beloved Susan Parody. Susan Parody, if you don't know, started a website in 2006, where she published countless free resources for music teachers to print and use in their studios. She was a trailblazer for so many educational bloggers and creators today. And Susan sadly passed in early March of this year. Susan Parody is a beautiful example of someone who gave more generously than most to this profession. She eventually recognized the need to monetize her site, not because she needed to become wealthy from her resources, but simply to be able to afford to keep it going. All of this content creation business takes time and it takes money to pay for the resources that we need to get these things into the public eye. So, over the years, I heard all kinds of opinions on her choice to release so much for free. Business types would say, I can't believe how much Susan gives away for free. She should be charging for everything. And at the same time, I heard plenty of teachers make comments like, oh, she's charging for so many things now. I liked it better when everything was free. Of course we did. But because of how much I've benefited from Susan Parody's resources, every fall, when my studio materials fee come in for the year, I make it a point to purchase a few of her paid resources as well. It's a small amount of money spent, yet I feel good about where it's going. And see, that's the key, friends, to feel good about where your money is going. Again, if we are not supporting artists in our communities and beyond, who do we expect to do it? If we claim the arts are so important, yet we aren't willing to budget for these things, how do we expect to see these programs survive in a difficult economy? I want to be clear, there is obviously tons of nuance here. You might be in a season where you cannot afford to support your local community theater. I am not here trying to guilt you, I promise. But I do hope that you consider the ways in which you can support creative efforts, whether that's now or in the future. I am far from having this figured out, friends. I mean, one of my bucket list hopes is to own a large piece or two of artwork by this artist that I follow on Instagram. Truth be told, there are lots of artists I would love to commission work from, but I am totally obsessed with this woman's work. Her name is Rochelle Kearns, and she paints in circles. It's work that at first glance might seem simple, but when you take a second glance, the layers and the depth and the light that she is able to capture in her painting, it just blows my mind. The sheer amount of time required to imagine and to execute her work, the way she's devoted her craft to these meticulous circles, there's just something about it that brings me so much joy. It makes me feel optimism and inspiration and connected to things in this world that we otherwise take so for granted. Her work feels like an exhale for my spirit. And someday I will have her work on my walls. It's not for me in this season of life because I have young kids and a family who needs to take a vacation. But I can dream and I can keep it on radar and start to make it a priority someday. Even though I know I can't do it right now, the idea of getting some of this beautiful artwork on my walls while I'm also helping an artist I admire pay some bills for a week or two, that would make me so happy. P.S. If you want to see Rochelle's work, I will link it in today's show notes. Okay, so let's wrap up with a toast for today, and then we have the return of Teacher Friend of the Week to celebrate. Studio music teacher friends from all around the world. Today, I want to leave you with 3 important reminders. Number 1, since people make financial priorities based on what's important to them, artists should spend like artists, which means supporting creative work in whatever ways we can. Number 2, frugality is a well-worn component of many of our lives. We should use our carefully honed spending habits to support the things of the world that we value, not just to look for discounts on everything. Number 3, beware of the trap of undervaluing your own services. You are not going to be able to support the arts community or anything else you find valuable if you are not first charging tuition rates that support you. This is me raising my glass to you, all of my community-minded friends. Hear, hear. Get excited, friends! It's time to celebrate our Teacher Friend of the Week. You know how I mentioned earlier that one of the keys to spending like an artist is to feel good about where your money is going? Well, this week's Teacher Friend of the Week is none other than my friend and colleague, Tiffany Arnold. Tiffany is my youngest daughter's violin teacher. She's also a member of our Patreon community. And I've got to tell you, she is the easiest bill I pay every month. Mrs. Arnold is such a fantastic violin teacher. She balances Suzuki principles with multiple other resources and repertoire and teaching techniques, which just makes my eclectic teacher heart so happy. Beyond all the musical progress my kiddo makes, the sweet relationship that they share is what makes that check such an easy one to write every single month. And I hope you know, despite the fact that many studio families appear otherwise, I'm sure that you are someone's easiest payment to make each month as well. I know we all wish we didn't have to deal with the money and could simply do this for love of the music, but I hope you are able to release some of the burden you feel today, because there are families in your studio who get it and who pay you joyfully, full of appreciation for the good work that you do. May it always be so, right? Thank you for hanging out with me today, friends. I hope I've given you some things to consider when it comes to spending like an artist. I know none of us like to be challenged about how we spend our money, and I know many teachers listening feel as though they are struggling to meet their basic needs, let alone trying to buy season orchestra tickets. I just hope we can agree that creatives are worth supporting when our budgets allow for it. And I hope you will consider ways that you could offer community support as you put together next year's tuition rates. For more information on how I can help you figure that stuff out, head to the show notes for today's episode at christinawhitlock.com/episode 163. Onward and upward, friends. I'll see you next week.